or we can do one now or later.
One sec here for Eric. So you spoke a little bit about the glycosylated markers test and the extended volatile markers test. I understand that extended test that you guys have come up with is really the one that provides the most information. But under what circumstances would you recommend one test over the other?
The best information clearly is given by measuring the volatile markers, the full panel, extended panel, and the glycosylated ones. Best samples are always samples that didn't have any contact with oak. Close second, you can get away with wines that were in the oldest, most neutral barrel that you can find, because the cresols, for example, are virtually absent from these barrels. So we can still have some assessment based on volatile compounds. Glycosylated markers are excellent because the wood doesn't contribute at all. But again, there is, in most cases, you can expect volatile compounds to be high when you have high glycosylated compounds, but not always. So yes, that's important to identify these wines where you have some of the forms, but not the others, or the opposite.
Okay, thank you for that. One more question for you, Eric, and Anita, if you're still around. If you want to get a grape baseline in a season without smoke, when should you take that sample? Should you take the sample, pre-fermentation or after fermentation? Where do you think we should take our grape baseline samples for vintages not affected by smoke?
Depends on the test. Sorry, Anita.
Okay. Well, I would say for grapes, I would take it close to harvest at ripeness, because that is what relates the best to your wine. If you can, and you have been making bucket ferment, do a bucket ferment and get on the bucket ferment as well, because then you can directly compare that. But also, if you wanted to relate to your commercial scale, I would take a sample after malolactic fermentation. It seems that there's a faster rate of release from bound to free until after malolactic fermentation. And then there is that slow change and evolution during further aging of the wine. But the fastest change seems to be happening in the shortest period of time in that range, from crushed to malolactic fermentation.
Thank you.
Okay, one thing to add about when it's about grape tests, direct grape tests, the beauty of the guaiacol for methyl guaiacol is that regardless of the grape variety, you can expect less than 0.5 ppb. That's how low we report for all varieties except Syrah. So for this, if you want some quick answers, yes, even if you didn't do the legwork before, you will still have answers.
Yeah, and to Eric's point, so this is why getting actually a number on a wine or a bucket fermentation has a little bit more value, because these numbers become higher. I don't want to exclude grapes, because at this point in time, a lot of contracts and crop insurance still wants that grape number. So that's why there's still value there, even though they are now made a concession and including the bucket ferments, and I will keep pushing on this, but just in case, it's like keeping that backup sample. I think you need a number for both a ferment and perhaps the grapes.
Good. You know, I was talking to a winemaker the other day, and the conversation between winemakers and growers is difficult to watch that unfold, because the growers have they have insurance claims, and the winemakers oftentimes are in some cases are less concerned about the numbers and really more concerned about how the wine tastes. So it's interesting. I hope that we're all able to find a middle ground that works for both the winemakers and the growers. It's a really difficult conversation. I guess let's see if there's any more questions. If not, I'll just go ahead and jump into our presentation.
Actually, yes, Daniel, I was going to introduce you, but I think you could just go ahead and just keep talking and take it away. Give me a moment. Daniel has been with Laffort USA since 2019. He comes from Tennessee, where his undergrad was in biochemistry, which does two things. One is it makes his experience in winemaking all the more interesting, and also explains his love of good data, good wine, and good science. And Daniel does not have an accent, so please take it away.
Thanks. Thanks, Sean. So yeah, like Sean said, I have a winemaking background, and I worked with a food scientist at Washington State, where we use machine learning to predict how wines are going to taste. Dr. Carolyn Ross up there, she was really awesome. So let's see if I can share my screen. That should be good. Okay. So everybody kind of knows it was a crazy time. There was a lot of smoke, there were a lot of fires, and there was a pandemic. So it was really hard for our technical team to go out and see people. So instead of just closing our business, we decided to do a really in-depth investigation. We had the video from Anita, and that enabled us to do a whole bunch of bucket ferments. So we did over 100, maybe like 120. I lost count at some point. So we used the information that was available to assess and validate our products. This is part of a larger investigation that consists of part 1 and part 2, that is very similar to what Anita did, where she looked at products in oak, and then she looked at remediation techniques using enzymes and filtration. So we're kind of following in her footsteps, validating some of her work, and investigating what it is that we can do. We'll talk about part 1, which was the investigation of Laffort ingredients to determine if you could make additions proactively during winemaking and have an impact. We still don't know if the impact is a lasting impact, and we suspect that things will shift as the wine begins to age. Things will begin to get worse, but we're dedicated to providing solutions for winemakers. So this is a developmental piece of Laffort. Laffort funds, I think, 25 different PhDs around the world. And so we're not just, we are a supplier, we do sell products, but we have another mission, which is to increase learning and to work with nature instead of against it. So I'm not really sure what we do in this case with all the fires, but what we decided to do was to assess how our products work. One interesting aspect of this was that we knew we'd be able to reach a lot of people. So we decided to do a quantitative analysis with our laboratory in France. Would have loved to have done the analysis at ETS, but they were hammered with samples. And I think it's always important to support your local lab if possible. But we have a lab that we used in France in this case. So we did quantitative analysis, and we did a subjective sensory analysis using our phones that I think almost 300 people participated in a sensory panel where we used attribute intensity ratings and some Python backend scripting and Tableau to kind of illustrate the results. So, like I said, it was 100 or over 100 microferments from Napa, the Central Coast, and Washington. From the Central Coast, we had the Pinot Noir. From Napa, we had the Cabernet Sauvignon and the Cabernet Franc from Oakville. We also had a Merlot from Washington and Red Mountain. So our entire team collaborated. Each of the technical representatives were a very integral part of this process. So we looked at yeast derivatives, Geosorb, Polylact, KC+, Meshnicoia, or fruity thiol-producing strain of yeast, and skim milk. And then we assess some toasted and untoasted oak additives as well. So this is us doing the bucket ferments. We've got them all lined up. There are, like Sean said, there are buckets everywhere. And I think maybe next year for harvest, for our harvest gifts, instead of a flashlight, we'll give you a bucket. Maybe not, but anyway, we have a lot of buckets. There are the guys bottling. It was a lot of work. I did some fermentations over in Stag's Leap, and this was the view to. This was on the way to work earlier in the year. So yeah, we all got together and we made it work. Like I said, we're just trying to come up with some solutions for you guys. These are the trials that we performed. And so each of the trial arms are here. We performed the ingredient trials in triplicate and the oak treatments in duplicate. The general chemistry of each of the varietals is listed here. You'll notice that the Pinot Noir did not finish malolactic fermentation. And we did notice, so we ran an internal trial before we ran the large scale trial, and we did notice that that high ethanol, high sugar, and pH have a big impact on how the wine works. And I can't stress enough, the matrix of the wine is so complex. Each varietal is very different. Anita talked about this. So in some of our results, we see evidence of that there's synergistic compounds, there are masking effects, really all the things that you learn in sensory science really kind of come to light when you're doing a large scale trial like this. For the free smoke compounds, these were the levels that we got back. So some of the results I just got today, and we closed the pigeonhole yesterday for voting. So you'll have to forgive me. I've been up working on getting this data presentable for you. So these are the compound levels that we saw. You know, the best estimate threshold for wine really was established for glycol, was really established for Brettanomyces spoilage, and those numbers don't really apply here. And I don't want to say that the numbers are meaningless, because they provide insight, but I do think that winemakers, at least a lot of winemakers, are really more concerned with how the wines taste and smell and feel inside your mouth, and less so about these numbers. But we've got them, and Excel was able to do some precursor, give us some insight into the precursor compounds as well. I'm not entirely sure about that process. I know that acid hydrolysis is a key component of the free and bound test, but I haven't seen the documentation on how or the method on how they're getting these precursor numbers. let's talk a little bit about the treatments that we did. I'm going to show you this because we had yeast derivative A and yeast derivative B. We put the yeast derivatives into the ferment as we added the yeast. We added the derivatives, and here it's going. There's a positive trend, right? So this is total glycol. Here's the control. Here's the yeast derivative A, and here's the yeast derivative B, or yeast derivative A at a higher dosage. So the more yeast derivative we add, the more glycol there appears to be. This would be the wrong direction. So this is where we shout, "You're going the wrong way." Then also in yeast derivative B, we saw an increase in these things. That's part of the data, and I wanted to represent the data more holistically. We haven't done analysis. We don't know how significant these results are until we can actually do some statistics. Here is what you want to see. You want to see a reduction of compounds related to smoke. This is the geosorb. And so we see that there's an impact. We add geosorb and we have less compounds related to smoke. So this is good. It's good to validate it in multiple varietals, but each varietal is different. So you look at the geosorb in Pinot and it doesn't respond the same way. This is probably what you would expect in Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc, where there's a reduction. And so these are the kinds of things that we look at and we investigate and we utilize to provide people and winemakers with product guidance. I'm going to switch over to the sensory test, or the sensory platform that we created. I'll start with the Pinot and kind of go over how things look. I'm just going to get rid of a couple of things. So we just have the control. The control on top. These are the control aromas, flavors, and mouthfeel. And then this radar plot is generated using transformation. We can talk more about that if you want to, but I'll just kind of go through these results. So the test results will appear on the bottom here. So we see when we add geosorb at 40 grams per hectoliter and then at 60 grams per hectoliter, people seem to think that it gets better. There's an impact on the smoky and ashy flavors, along with the lingering ash, or that retronasal ashiness that Anita was talking about. As far as reduction, if we just look at the flavor of ashiness, what the impact looks like. So what's the impact compared to the control? It's a couple of points in most cases. There's some things to consider like bias and things like that. I would there are some things that we could do to make the sensory study better. But just getting it all up and running was a lot to do, and everybody had a lot to do. These are the yeast derivatives. So the yeast derivatives also show an impact on the perception, the sensory character of the wine, and conversely, if we go back to the analysis where you actually got an increase in the compounds related to smoke, but the perception was that the products were making it better. The yeast derivatives increase, in particular, the mouthfeel associated with the roundness and the fruity flavor. So what we see is that you can build in a smoke tainted vintage, you can both mask the compounds and you can kind of build around that bitterness that's associated with the mouthfeel, and try to encapsulate those things to kind of hide them. So again, just using the numbers isn't always a great way to go about it. I would recommend bench trials and trying multiple products. Let's get away from the Pinot and look at the Cab. The KC, each of the products appeared to have a positive effect. Even the Polylact and the KC Plus. So somebody recommended skim milk at 10 milliliters per liter, which is enough to make your fermentation look milky. So there are a lot of things to talk about. It's a huge data set. It represents almost 30,000 different data points. So it's a pretty massive data grab. I'm not sure that anyone else has done a smoke investigation with 300 panelists in the wine industry before. So we are working to develop solutions and come up with ideas along with the researchers and the labs to provide insight into our product line. This is pretty much, what we see overall is that there is an impact with the addition of products, even if you don't see it in the numbers on your analysis results. We are impacting the way that the wine tastes, and that does appear to serve as a benefit, especially in the case of Geosorb. So if you were to say, or if you were to be approached with another scenario where you were you knew that smoke was present in your vintage, one thing that you might consider doing to both reduce the amount of compounds related to smoke and increase or improve the quality of the wine would be to make a preemptive addition of Geosorb. That's scary to a lot of people because people associate adding activated carbon with removing color and flavors, and so people don't want to strip the wine. So a lot of winemakers were very hesitant to add activated carbon to the ferment. But we see that the impact on this Merlot is actually is very low, and in the case of the control, where there was a rating of 6.7, by adding the Geosorb, we actually increased the compound or increased the perception of fruitiness because we're destroying or disrupting the compounds related to bitterness and ones that are related to smoke. So there's a lot going on. It's a very complex system. And with that, I will switch back to my PowerPoint. So we had aromas and flavors and mouthfeel as 15 attributes, or 15 attributes. You had a scale from 0 to 15 to rate each of those attributes. All of the, or nearly all of the panelists had over 10 years of experience. We did collect some demographic information that we can look at in the future. We know that there are people out there who are really good at tasting and other people that are not really good at tasting. And even some people have a genetic propensity to be what are known as super tasters. So we have a lot of data, and I think we go back and we kind of look to see if there's correlation, run some significance testing as well. So big questions. Winemakers want to know which products reduce smoke taint. Geosorb appears to be the best. It reduces the compounds and it influences the sensory character in a positive way. Yeast derivatives influence the sensory character, but they don't reduce the smoke-related compounds. And you have to remember, this is only 6 months in. So after another 6 months, we'll revisit this study and see how things progress. And so sometimes improving the quality reduces the smoke character. So that's important to think about if you want to mask some of that character later on with some nanoprotein or something like that. And so what are the dosages that work? You know, people want to know which product works and how much do I add. If it were me, I would add, if you had a moderately smoke tainted vintage, something like last year, or even a heavily smoke tainted vintage, I would start by adding Geosorb at 100 grams per hectoliter and possibly higher, depending on the level of the smoke exposure. Polylact and KC Plus appear to do some interesting things, but they don't appear to reduce the compounds related to smoke, but they do impact the sensory character. So I don't know that this is the largest comprehensive study that's been done so far on products and just the sheer number of panelists that we were able to get. But it's important to say that there's no silver bullet or magic bullet or magic recipe. We can't prove anything yet. This is data. All of those numbers that you saw were the averages of what the panelists thought and how they felt the wine was affected. So it's just pretty raw data. We can show you what everyone thought, but proving significance or saying that every wine is the same and can be treated the same would be a pretty big fallacy. So there are other treatments. People ask, is there anything else that I can do in remediation? Anita talked a little bit about filtration, and we have considered coupling filtration with enzyme use. We did some developmental enzyme work this year in the Central Valley, and are interested in trying this out and seeing how we can couple technologies to get a better effect from filtration. We are looking for donations on around 200 gallons. If you have 200 gallons of wine that you're going to have to get rid of, we are definitely looking for donations to continue the study. The cost, a lot of people want to know, how much does it cost to add Geosorb at these rates, and then do a cost benefit analysis. Contact your sales or technical representative, and they can give you pricing on these products. People also want to know if they can do multiple treatments to get a better benefit. We didn't test any multiple factors or anything like that. So theoretically you could, but we didn't test that. We're gonna revisit the wines in 6 months and see what happens. As far as sensory is concerned, product additions appear to make the wine better for everyone. We also ran 2 sets of analysis, one in February and one in December, and we do see a shift, right? So these compounds are not, there is a movement from free to bound, or from bound to free, excuse me, and we are observing that. So we're seeing the same thing that the researchers have spoken about. I know Anita and Tom Collins up in Washington have just done an amazing amount of work, and we're really glad to kind of follow up and continue looking at these issues as they arise with the industry. We had a lot of partners, so big thanks to everyone who helped us through either a donation or with just space. We were evacuated from St. Helena. We went to Oakville. We got evacuated from Oakville, and then we ended up by the airport in Napa. So it was pretty crazy, but a lot of fun, and I think we got a lot of really great data, and we're ready to tell people what we see and what people can taste, and I think that's the really important part. This is a kind of an introduction to part two, kind of what we were thinking about using beta glucosidase and filtration, and kind of coupling those things together to see if we can get an improvement. This was something that VA Filtration released in one of the magazines. I think maybe it was Wine Business Monthly. I can't remember which one last year. They saw some reduction using their filtration apparatus, but then many winemakers have said, oh, you do it and then the smoke taint comes back. So we want to look at maybe some enzyme use. So my friend Brian at Tastery was kind enough to run the free compounds for us on his GC, and we do see a release of guaiacol when adding the beta glucosidase. So we're interested in moving forward with this, and just increasing the work and our strategy to find solutions for winemakers. We started by examining proactive steps using Laffort products during fermentation. We looked at examining the impact of noble oak treatments on the smoke-exposed fruit. We performed a quantitative analysis and a large-scale sensory analysis. We'll do this again in 6 months to see how the wines have evolved. And we want to investigate remediation by coupling filtration and processing aids. So a lot of work to be done. We did have a pretty good time. I think this is the end of my presentation. So I'll look and see if we had any questions here. Can you use Geosorb in the wine, or is it only recommended for fermentation? We tried it in fermentation. Theoretically, you could add it. You could add it after fermentation. What we did was to use it proactively. So yeah, when was the Geosorb added? Yeah, we added it during ferment. Seemed to work well. Something else to talk about was the masking. So, like Anita said, it's a very complex matrix. There are synergistic compounds at play, and masking did appear to have an effect according to our panel. And that is all I have. One last question about statistical significance. Is the work that we did significant? We don't know yet. Like I said, I got the chemical analysis this morning from France at about 9:30, and we had a data pipeline issue last night at 5:30. So we don't know yet, but we're working on it, and we will definitely get back to you, or publish in Catalyst or something to kind of get those results out to you guys.
Excellent.